What's up? This is Robert from Existence First, here to do the Saturday lecture. I'm back after a 1-week break because I was moving, so I'm filming this right now from my new apartment in downtown. So let me pull up the my recorder. Hang on a second. And then we could start. All right, welcome to the Spiritual Self-Defense Podcast, protection for your mind, your emotions, and your life. Just like when you go out in the world and you need to defend yourself against attackers, so too you must know how to defend your mind, your spirit, your soul against laziness, self-doubt, lack of confidence, sloppy thinking, criticism from others, everything. This podcast is sponsored by my coaching company, Existence First, a community of deep thinkers dedicated to self-help and constant self-improvement. So on that note, as you may know, the last 2 weeks I've been moving. I didn't do a lecture last week because I was moving and because I had computer technical difficulties, right? Now, what's interesting is that if you Google most stressful life events, you will find that consistently ranked number 1 is death of a spouse or divorce. And after those is moving. And that makes me think, really? Is moving really the third most stressful life event for the human being? Like, is it really that bad? And it was somewhat stressful this time around, but not for the same reasons, I guess. So, in any case, I got the job done. I'm here in downtown San Jose. Whoa, that was the ice maker. Downtown San Jose, fabulous apartment in perfect location, right next to the restaurants and bars. Not that we can go out and enjoy them as much as we used to during Corona chaos, but nonetheless, it's a great location. Now, let's see. How do I want to present this? I came up with a thought experiment, and because here's the thing that we can all relate to, is there are times when we feel bad, and then we don't like that we're feeling bad. So we feel bad about feeling bad, which then is meta emotions, right? So one thing we would have to consider if we want to really do a psychological inventory of ourselves is our ratio of emotion to meta emotion. So emotion is, I'm feeling nervous, and then meta emotion would be, I'm angry that I'm feeling nervous, right? So how much of those two do you experience in a given day? That will tell you something about yourself. Now, to raise awareness into our emotions, I came up with this thought experiment, okay? I want you to imagine that there's a contest going on, worldwide contest. So calling all engineers. All engineers are able to enter into this contest, and the contest is very simple. You must create a robot that will then go out in the world, live its robot life, along with all of the other robots created by the other engineers in the contest. And the robot that is the last one to be alive, the one that lives the longest. When all other robots die, the one that lives the longest is the winner. Okay, and that engineer receives a large cash prize and then gets on the front page of the newspaper or something. Okay, so imagine that such a contest was going on. Now, if if we're going to imagine that situation, you have to start asking, how would the engineer go about making this robot? How would they go about making a robot that's going to survive longer than all of the other robots? To answer that, you then need to invert and use reverse engineering, or use, what do you call it, like a reverse psychology thing, and ask, okay, well, if, what are the greatest threats to the survival of the robots? What's the greatest threats? Well, what's number one? Okay, well, if it rains, then maybe it could short circuit the robot's like circuitry, and then the robot would malfunction and die, right? So you would need to program the robot to stay out of the rain. In order to stay out of the rain, it needs to have some sort of sensor that can detect the rain, right? Then that detection of the rain then needs to create something in that robot that causes the robot to run away from the rain, okay? Then what else would you need? Well, another threat is, let's say, if someone were to come up upon the robot and like hit it with a baseball bat and smash it into pieces, then that also would effectively kill the robot. So the robot would need to know if it was being struck, if it was being hit, it would need to be triggered to run away, right? Or to fight off and neutralize that threat. And if you're thinking hard about this, you're starting to realize that I'm describing the evolution of the human being, and the evolution of fight or flight, the evolution of anxiety, right? So you're starting to realize that the robot is going to need certain emotions, that they would be helpful, right? Well, if you're programming, then you don't, it's a little bit different, right? But for Homo sapiens, the way that our programming works is through emotion. So something happens, and then we feel these emotions towards it, right? And this is very hardwired into us. Even like it's even been proven in brain studies. I remember learning this in anatomy physiology class, that there are parts of the brain that kind of get triggered when something visual like runs across your visual field, right, an object, or when you hear footsteps. I think it's the superior and inferior colliculi or something like that. But also when there's noise, like when there's steps that are going towards you, it registers a little bit differently in the brain versus steps that you hear that are getting farther away from you. And you can tell just because of the sound waves and the change in them, right? Like a Doppler effect sort of a thing. So the brain gets signaled more when there's like something approaching you, which is why, you know, you might hear steps behind you and you might turn around to see who's like running up to you. That's very useful when it comes to survival. All right, and you might get nervous about that, right? You might hear footsteps running up towards you, and you start to get a little nervous, right? At that point, there's no reason to be angry at that emotion. There's no reason to be like angry at, oh, I got anxious again. Like that's actually, see, and that's the misunderstanding of emotions. The misunderstanding of emotions is that emotions really are communications. They're signals. They're this one author I've been reading a lot, Frederick Dodson, he refers to them as navigation tools. And I think that's a very good way of phrasing it. So these emotions are like navigation tools, like navigation programs. So when an emotion hits us, right, like we're feeling sad or something, right, we need to see what is this telling us? That's the question that I ask myself, right? Is it's a cue to listen, right? So, for instance, it would be silly if I was just like complaining about the feeling of hunger. Like every time I need to eat, I get this bad feeling of like I guess it's called hunger, right? This feeling of like wanting food and not having food. And I mean, every time I get this feeling, I just go to the fridge and I eat something, right? But I wish that I didn't have this feeling called hunger. That's this negative feeling that, that's absurd. Why? Because we realize that hunger is a call to action, right? It's a call to go eat. And what we don't realize with the other emotions, depression, anxiety, etc., is that they also are calls to action. So, for instance, I moved into this apartment and I was getting just like frustrated and like irritable and just feeling lost, right? Now, why was that? In part because it was crazy trying to hook up the internet here, but also other things. My computer was like breaking and and then I'm trying to like figure out where do I put the garbage and even simple stuff, right? Like the sink water like didn't taste good, so then I have to go buy this water filter and stuff. So anyways, all of that was like upsetting me, right? And when the negative emotion hits, the next question is, all right, let me listen. What do I need to learn here? Or what do I need to hear, right? A lot of times, I had a friend over here, right? And it was late at night and we were going to walk back to this person's car. And because it's downtown and it was late at night, I was like, oh, I just don't have a good feeling about walking down the street that late. So I said, we're going to drive. We're going to go down to the garage, get in my car, and then we'll drive to the other person's car. And that's what we did, right? So the emotion that I had was almost like a warning signal, right? And the proper response, I was happy with the response that I had to it, which was you take action, you make a decision. You say, oh yeah, I don't know how I feel about this, so I'm going to do X or Y or Z, right? Or A, B, or C. So it becomes then this like chess game. So imagine that you're trying to play a strategy game like chess, and you're thinking of different ways you can move your piece, right? And all of a sudden, you start to panic that, it looks like it looks like the opponent's queen is in a position where they might be mounting an attack, or they might, right? And imagine a chess player that just freaks out at that point and just is like, oh, I don't have a good feeling about this, right? It's like, that's absurd, that person would be a horrible chess player. And yet, how many times can you go through one day in your life and catch people around you saying that that level of vibrational thought of oh yeah, I don't have a good feeling about this, or oh, I shouldn't have made that move, oh yeah, I always make that dumb move, I just lost a pawn because of that, blah blah blah. And like, those people would be horrible chess players. Well, guess what? Those people make horrible human beings. And I don't say that to be mean to them, but to just call reality as it is. If you're focusing on the past, you're falling short of your potential. If you're focusing on your negative emotions more than you need to, you're not fulfilling your potential. You're falling short. If you are getting obsessed with your emotions and not viewing them as information that can help you make a decision or not make a decision, then you're falling short of your potential. So when it comes down to it is, let's go full circle back to the original thought experiment of this robot stuff. So you're designing this robot that you want it to survive as best as possible. There's all these threats. How is the robot going to know how much food and water to take in? Or maybe not water, but what would a robot need that would be corollary to water? I guess it would be, what would it need? It would need to oil oil its joints or whatever, right? Okay, if it has metal arms, it's going to need lubricant oil, right? So how would it know how much to, how would it know when to take in that, or when to take in like electricity or something, right? When to charge its batteries? How would the robot know when it's time to charge? Because if it just ignored that and ran out of charge, then it's dead. So how would it know? That's the same thing as the human being knowing when to eat. Is we have all of these we have this set of emotions that help navigate us, right? And go this way or that way and decide how to use scarce resources. The scarce resource we have is our time and our energy. All right, we could spend the next hour going searching for food, or we can spend the next hour hiding, or we can spend the next hour running from a predator. We need to decide how to use our time and energy. Now, the crucial determinant in which of those three actions is the best one to take is what's going on. If there is no predator, then it makes zero sense to go running from predators, right? You wouldn't want to spend the next hour running for your life if there's no threat. Again, if you've had enough food, you don't want to spend the next hour like hunting or eating or something, right? If you just ate, you don't want to spend the next hour eating, right? It's a poor use of your resources, okay? So how does that, obviously that's more of like, they would call like the savannah, like African savannah mind or thinking or context, right? But our brains have not really changed that much throughout evolution. So in a modern context, that means going to work, going to your job, starting a new job. That means learning new routines at your new job. That means meeting new people. That means meeting strangers, or meeting new people, whether it's at parties or out in at events, right? Public speaking, all of these things now that are parts of our modern existence, our modern living. Now you see that our emotions help us to navigate those also, and our emotions help us to make decisions. So what's really crucial, if you're going to build this robot, the robot needs to know what's going on in my environment, right? It needs to know what's my internal state right now. Am I hungry? Do I need more food? Do I need more water? Am I overheating? Do I need to stand in the shade and cool down, or can I go back in the sun to heat up, right? It needs to know internal state and external state. And then from those things, it needs to make judgments about what is important to pursue and what is not important to pursue. Tai Lopez is a very good way of putting this in terms of the misweighting bias, right? So, you could be, also, let me borrow an example from The Millionaire Mind, right? Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker, amazing book that everyone should read. He points out that in the Secrets of the Millionaire Mind book, he points out how hundreds of people will show up and wait for hours in line at a KFC for a free bucket of chicken, when in those 2 or 3 hours that it takes them to wait for that chicken, which the bucket of chicken has a dollar value of like $3.99 or $4.99 or whatever. So basically, they're spending 3 hours to get $4 worth of value. Now, if they were to work and try to produce something, could they make more than $4 in 3 hours? Probably. So it's sort of like a misallocation of resources of their own time and energy to stand in line for this free deal, right? When they could be working. Now, I catch myself doing that all the time. When I moved into this apartment, a big way that I got off track was I started shopping, right? I'm like getting addicted to Facebook Marketplace, because you can get like all this like cool furniture for cheap and stuff, right? And I'm just like scrolling through this thing hours and hours, and I'm like, trying to find these good deals and this and that. I'm like, oh, I need a new desk and this. I'm working right now on a folding table, okay? But this is the right decision. Why? Because my time is more important. Because right now I'm producing. I'm not out there trying to look for ways to spend money. I'm here producing, making videos, right? And practicing. This use of time is so much more valuable. Am I doing it on a folding table? So what, right? This was an intelligent decision. It would have been a misweighting bias to place more importance on, oh, I need to go get the right table, and then spend hours doing that instead of making this video. So the ability of the human being to prioritize, right, at a very elementary level is allows it to survive. The human being that knows when to run versus when to go get food, when to eat versus when to sleep, those basic functions, if you can prioritize that, good. You've met level 1. You have survived. But then there's level 2, which is getting some things done, and then there's level 3, which is extreme success. And what I know from following the people at the top layer of extreme success is that, and I've gone to many seminars, Tony Robbins, and all, you name it, all of these seminars I've studied significantly and read throughout this topic, right? What you see at that top level is, just got a notification, so not distract me. What you see at that top level is that they have such a knack, such an ability for prioritizing and spending their scarce resource of time on the right things, the high impact things, versus spending them on low impact things. That's light years ahead of survival, right? Again, 3 levels. If you can prioritize basic things, right, you can survive. Congratulations. But if you can get to the 2nd and 3rd levels of prioritizing, when it's time to grow a business versus when it's time to focus on work, when it's time, when you get to your job, whatever that is, when it's time to shut off your phone and get something done in a very well-focused environment, those are the huge tasks or the huge abilities that really define. And yes, emotions play a role, but intelligence also plays a role. So it's an intertwining of emotion and intelligence. Okay? All right, that's all for now. You can write in the comments below. This will be posted to YouTube and Facebook. So write in the comments what topics you would like to see in the future, as well as what questions you have. And we'll see you next week. Think deeply and put your existence first.